welcome to Primetime. I'm your host, Vimbai Tandi, coming to you from Bulawayo at the Zimbabwe International Trade Fair, ZITF 2026. Tonight, we're joined by the United States Ambassador, Pamela Tremont, here for high-level engagements around trade, investment, and bilateral relations. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Let me start with the Zimbabwe International Trade Fair. This is your second time attending here in Bulawayo. What anchors your participation this time around?
Well, this is our third year participating as an embassy, twice for me now. But we're participating because, of course, this is the premier trade show in all of Zimbabwe every year. So we're excited to be here to talk about how we can improve trade and investment between our two countries, which I think is a priority for both of our governments and is good for both the people of America and of Zimbabwe. We're also participating in ZB Bank's Innovators Forum. We brought an expert speaker in to talk about innovation and AI, entrepreneurship and STEM. We're supporting the American Chamber of Commerce and the members of the American Chamber of Commerce that are displaying here at the ZITF. So we have a lot going on, and it's great to be here.
And what stands out to you about Zimbabwe's business environment this year compared to your last visit?
Well, I think there's still a lot of interest in the Zimbabwean economy and Zimbabwean commerce. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about critical minerals these days and diversifying our supply chains, but also about, responsible investment that benefits the people of the country where it occurs. And so we think American companies bring a lot to the table and have a lot to offer in that respect.
And let's talk about Freedom 250. There's been growing conversation around Freedom 250. What does this moment mean for Zimbabwe and perhaps more broadly for Africa?
Well, I'll start by saying what Freedom 250 means for us, because of course it is the celebration of our 250th birthday, the anniversary of our independence. And so we've introduced a year-long series of events, all sorts of youth forums and discussions of technology, a book club. We're going to be celebrating our history and all of the things that have made America the great country that it is, a global leader in industry, commerce, innovation, education, and even film and music. And so we want to highlight that for the rest of the world and celebrate what got us to this point. And that, of course, includes 46 years of partnership with Zimbabwe. We were the first country to recognize an independent Zimbabwe. We've been a long-standing partner to the Zimbabwean people since then. And so for 46 years, we've been, basing our relationship on the values that we share in our Constitution and in our cultures. And so we think it has a lot to offer Zimbabwe and Africa as well. And it gives us a chance to reflect on not only what brought us here after 250 years, but also what we envision for the next 250 years for both the United States and Zimbabwe.
And what kind of initiatives or collaborations can Zimbabweans expect as part of this commemoration?
Well, as I said, we're going to be hosting everything from book clubs to film showings and celebrations of all the things that America is sort of known for. We're introducing tomorrow a exhibition at the Bulawayo Gallery of our Founders Museum, which is an AI generation of our founders and the signers of the Declaration of Independence. We think that's an exciting way to share our history in a really new and innovative way. It'll be there for the next 6 weeks, so we hope people will have a chance to go see it.
And looking at our critical minerals, Zimbabwe holds significant deposits of critical minerals that are key to global industries. What is the United States' interest in Zimbabwe's critical mineral sector?
Well, as everybody knows, we're interested in diversifying our supply chains because, of course, as a global leader in innovation and technology, these critical minerals are necessary for the sorts of things that have made us successful up to now and will take us into the future of energy security and AI, to name just two things, right? And Zimbabwe has so many critical minerals that it has on offer. We think that if they were more sustainably used, they could be more beneficial to the Zimbabwean people. And so we're interested in working with partners here in Zimbabwe who share our commitment to diversified supply chains and international best practices.
And how does the U.S. plan to engage differently from other global players?
Well, we think U.S. companies have a lot to offer. They respect the environment, they respect local labor law, they do not engage in corruption, which can corrode the investment climate in any country. And so we think American companies would be very good participants in the critical minerals sector here and other industries as well. We have, for example, a company who has come here to open a business processing outsourcing business, and so employs, thousands of Zimbabweans to answer phone calls for offices in the United States and creating white-collar jobs for Zimbabweans that don't require any sort of resource extraction or any threat to the environment. So we're interested in critical minerals, obviously, but there's so many other ways we can cooperate and provide value to both our countries.
And looking at trade and investment, what would you say are the main barriers currently limiting increased trade between Zimbabwe and the United States?
Well, U.S. companies are looking for in Zimbabwe the same things they're looking for everywhere, right? That is a little bit of predictability, security of their property rights, the ability to expatriate profits. When I went to the mining indaba in Cape Town in February, I met a lot of U.S. companies, some of which were interested in Zimbabwe, some of which are a little nervous. And these are the sorts of things that they bring up to us all the time. And so since I've been here in almost 2 years now, I've been discussing with government partners and agency partners how to make the business climate here more competitive. Because of course, U.S. investors can go anywhere in the world. Capital flows to the easiest place where the cost benefit pays off the best for them. And we want Zimbabwe to be competitive in that space.
And what practical steps can Zimbabwe take to attract American investment?
Well, as I said, a bit of predictability in regulations and tax codes can help a lot. Companies decide to make a decision on investment based on a certain business plan. And if the rules of the road are changed partway into the investment, that can be very costly for them. So they're looking for political stability, they're looking for that regulatory certainty, they're looking for the infrastructure sometimes that they need. If it's mining, they might need electricity or rail or road to export products or import products. So these are the sorts of things they look for everywhere in the world, and we are having active conversations with the government all the time on this. And we have seen a lot of improvements in the investment climate here. The macroeconomic stability over the last 18 months has been fantastic. I think the business community is really happy about that, not just investors, but Zimbabwean entrepreneurs as well. We can't forget about them. And of course, the streamlining of some of the business licensing that's gone on, I think that really helps the local business community, but investors as well.
There is still some confusion locally about Zidera and recent developments around its repeal. Can you clarify the current position of the United States regarding Zidera?
Well, Zidera remains U.S. law. There was an amendment last fall that would have repealed Zidera under certain conditions, but that amendment was never passed. So at the moment, Zidera remains U.S. law. I would like to clarify that Zidera does not impose sanctions on the country of Zimbabwe or the people of Zimbabwe. The only thing Zidera does is it prevents us from supporting concessional financing from the international financial institutions. But of course, Zimbabwe hasn't been eligible for concessional financing since it defaulted in the late 90s. So we've never actually invoked Zidera at all, but it does remain US law.
And how would you describe the current state of relations between the United States and Zimbabwe?
Well, I think there's a lot to build on in this relationship. We're two countries who have dynamic people who appreciate freedom and want prosperity and peace. And that is a tremendous foundation from which we can build. And so we have active discussions with the government all the time about how we can improve relations. We would like to deepen those conversations and really talk about where we can take this relationship in the next 250 years.
And what areas of cooperation are working well right now?
Well, as I said, we have some great trade and investment stories. The business processing and outsourcing sector is really booming with a couple American investors and now some local investors too. There are some mining companies that are present here. Not very many, but one of them, for example, it's not an American company, but they just raised $150 million on the New York Stock Exchange. So we have quite a few investors that are interested in Zimbabwe. And I think that gives us a lot to talk about with the government about how we can really redouble our efforts in that area.
And before we wrap up, what message would you like to leave with Zimbabweans, particularly young entrepreneurs and business leaders watching tonight?
Well, as I said, I was just at the ZB Financial Holdings Innovators Forum where there were young Zimbabweans, some of whom had participated in our embassy exchange programs, and some who were there just having been selected for the forum. And I am just amazed all the time at how dynamic Zimbabweans are. They're such go-getters. There's so much enthusiasm, so many great ideas. We brought an expert speaker in for the Innovator Forum, and she was just so impressed by the questions that came from the audience. It really challenged her and her knowledge. And I think that's just a huge asset for this country. We talk so much about the critical minerals on the ground. We don't talk enough about the tremendous human resources on the ground. And I think that's really what's going to take Zimbabwe forward and something that we're looking forward to working with.
Ambassador, thank you so much for your time and your insights.
Thanks for having me. It's been great to talk to you.
And this was the United States Ambassador, Pamela Tremont, speaking to us here on Primetime. Stay with us with more conversations shaping Zimbabwe's economy and diplomatic future coming up.